Hi, this is Mark Pizzacalla and welcome to 3 Minutes with Mark. And what I want to talk about today is tax reform. And you might say, not again. Why do we need to talk about that? Well, as you know, the current Labor government is embarking on a process looking at reform of the tax system. Now, I've been reading the papers. I've been looking at theories about what may or may not happen, what's on the table, what's off the table, very popular phrases. Let me start with this. I can tell you what tax reform is not, and tax reform is not making adjustments to taxpayer thresholds, and it's not making changes, marginal changes to marginal tax rates. We all know that those sorts of things, there's a lot of politics and subjectivity which come into those sorts of decision making. Now, what tax reform is, however, it requires macro reform, it requires holistic reform, such that the changes to the various parts of the tax system make the tax system better, i.e., at the end of the reform process, you've got a better tax system than you did at the start. Now, when it comes to SMEs and small businesses, which is what I'm going to focus on, what are we going to do? Well, here's my three things. One, we need to look at the interaction between the GST system and direct taxes. It cannot be ignored any longer. Individuals since the 1960s have been doing all the heavy lifting. And since the last budget was handed down, we now have a situation where individual taxpayers are paying more than 50% of the tax take for government. Back in 2012, it was 39%. And this is the highest amount since 2000, which is when Mr. Howard introduced the GST, which took some pressure off individual taxpayers. But at the moment, individual taxpayers are paying nearly $30,000 each on average. That's a big number. Second thing, we have to stop applying a one-size-fits-all to small business. What do I mean by that? Well, we can't just look at certain categories of revenue and say, well, if you're in that category, this is what's going to happen to you. We need to be smarter than that. We need a smarter system to help small businesses navigate complex tax problems. So what do we do? The thing that I would do, I would start using a business lifecycle approach. A business lifecycle approach, which means that when you are formulating tax policy, let's have a look at what stage of the business lifecycle the business is in. That makes a lot of sense. So let me give you a simple example. If you are a startup and the government says, hey, we're going to give you a full tax deduction for all of your fixed assets that you're going to acquire. Well, that's great, but as a startup, I'm just starting out. I actually don't have any tax payable. So that concession is actually quite useless to me. So you need to look at the life cycle of an SME as it's going from startup, survival stage, as it's growing, and then as it matures, and then obviously there's a sale process when it's matured and the owners decide to get out. That's a different matter. Look, that's all I'm going to say today. This area is going to be fascinating over the next few months, and I'm going to keep you up to date. If you've got any questions, make sure you give me a call. Speak soon.